What is Pokemon? Reality, fiction, or your imagination? So what are you waiting for? Let's dive into this world of Pokemon. Pokemon is a franchise that was debuted in Japan in 1996. Starting with the first generation in 1996, Pokemon Red, Green, Blue was released. Pokemon Yellow was released. As a continuation to Red and Green, Fire Red and Leaf Green was released in 2004. By the year 2018, Pokemon Yellow was remade, titled Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. In the second generation, 1999, Pokemon Gold and Silver was released, and 1 year later, in 2000, Pokemon Crystal was released. As a continuation to Gold and Silver, Heart Gold and Soul Silver was released in 2009. The third generation of 2002, Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire were released, and 2 years later in 2004, Pokemon Emerald was released. As a continuation to Ruby and Sapphire, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire was released in 2014. Following the fourth generation of 2006, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl was released, and 2 years later, in 2008, Pokemon Platinum was released. The fifth generation of 2010, Pokemon Black and White was released, and 2 years later, in 2012, Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 was released. Coming to the sixth generation of 2013, Pokemon X and Y was released. Passing to the seventh generation of 2016, Pokemon Sun and Moon was released, and 1 year later, in 2017, Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon was released. By the eighth generation of 2019, Pokemon Sword and Shield was released. In 2020, the Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra was released. Then in 2021, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl was released, and 1 year later, in 2022, Pokemon Legends of Arceus was released. To the most current generation of Pokemon, Generation 9 of 2022, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was released, and 1 year later, in 2023, Pokemon Teal Mask and Indigo Disc was released. By the year 2025, Pokemon will release Legends ZA, which is a sequel to Legends of Arceus. Hey You Pikachu is a virtual pet Pokemon spin-off video game for the Nintendo 64 and was published by Nintendo. It was released in Japan on December 12, 1998, and in North America on November 6th of the year 2000. The player is asked to help Professor Oak test the PokeHelper, a device that lets humans communicate with Pokemon. The game is set in the Kanto region between Pewter City and Viridian City, where the player is introduced to a wild Pikachu. The player is able to communicate with a 256-word database through the Voice Recognition Unit, VRU, a Nintendo 64 hardware accessory that, when paired with the microphone, can comprehend and analyze human speech. Along with speaking with Pikachu, the VRU allows the player to move around and gather items. Pokemon Snap is a 1999 first-person photography game with rail shooter style gameplay mechanics and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo 64. It was first released in Japan in March 1999 and was later released in July 1999 in North America and in September 2000 for PAL regions. It is a spin-off game in the Pokemon series, being one of the first console-based games for it and featuring many Pokemon rendered for the first time in real-time 3D. The game was re-released for the Wii's Virtual Console in December 2007, for the Wii U's Virtual Console in 2016, and for the Nintendo Switch Online Plus Expansion Pack in June of 2022. Pokemon Stadium is a strategy video game developed and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo 64. It was released in Japan on April 30th, 1999, North America on March 6, 2000, in Australia on March 23rd, 2000, and in Europe on April 7th, 2000. It was the first Stadium title released in Western regions, succeeding the Japan-only 1998 Nintendo 64 release Pocket Monsters Stadium. The gameplay revolves around a 3D turn-based battling system using the 151 Pokemon from the Game Boy games Pokemon Red, Pokemon Blue, and Yellow.
It woke up. What'll it do? A decent hit. There's a big difference in HP. Earthquake. That's a good hit. Oh, it's down.
Pokemon Stadium 2 is a strategy video game developed and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo 64. It features all 251 Pokemon from the first and second generations of the franchise. It was released in Japan on December 14th, 2000, in North America on March 26th, 2001, and in Europe on October 10th, 2001. In Western regions, it was titled Pokemon Stadium 2, and it was the second Stadium game to be released outside Japan, in which it was the third game in the series. Pokemon Puzzle League is a puzzle video game in the Puzzle League series developed by Nintendo Software Technology and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo 64. Released in North America on September 25th, 2000, and in Europe on March 2nd, 2001, its Puzzle League-based gameplay has a focus on puzzle-based strategy in the game's grid-based format. To advance to new levels, players are required to combat the game's trainers and gym leaders.
Almost there.
Pokemon Pocket Monsters is a Japanese manga that was one of the first Pokemon manga to be released in Japan and ran for 13 volumes. In 2005, Chong-Yi published an English version of the manga in Singapore, retitling it Pokemon. Pokemon is also the abbreviated name of the Japanese anime television series Pocket Monsters, which premiered on TV Tokyo in April 1997. The series is part of the Pokemon Company's Pokemon Media franchise and is currently branded in English as Pokemon the Series. The Pokemon Trading Company, TCG was first released in Japan on October 20th, 1996, with the first starter and expansion pack base set. The set included 102 cards with illustrations by Ken Sugimori, Mitsuhiro Arita, and Keiji Kanebuchi. The cards were produced by the Japanese toy company Bandai and were available in small vending machines located on shop counters. The first set was called the green version and was released in September of 1996, followed by the red version in October. The cards were not put into packs, so players had to pull them directly from the vending machines. The TCG was based on the popular Game Boy games Pokemon Red and Green, which were released in 1996. The cards quickly became popular, and in 1998, a demo pack was released in the United States. The first full packs were released in January 1999 and were distributed by Wizards of the Coast. The 1999 base set included first edition and shadowless variations, and had rarities indicated by circles and diamonds. First edition and shadowless cards are rarer than standard unlimited prints, because fewer were produced. Early prints are also brighter in color and have a thinner font with lack a shadow around the pictures, which collectors call shadowless cards.